Welcome to Haunted Talks, the official podcast of The Haunted Walk, offering thematic walking tours in Ottawa, Kingston, and Toronto, Ontario. My name is Jim Dean. I am the creative director of the company, and I really appreciate you joining us for this month's show. In an unsuspecting field in northeast Georgia, in Elbert County, 4 massive granite slabs, each 16 feet tall, supporting a 25,000-pound capstone on top, rise out of the ground. With its central pillar, the monument could easily be mistaken for a giant paddle wheel. The Georgia Guidestones are often referred to as America's Stonehenge due to the many mysteries that surround them. Who built them? And why? What is the meaning of the strange inscriptions on the Guidestones? And why are they repeated in 8 different languages? Buckle up your seatbelts. We are taking a road trip to visit one of the strangest monuments in the United States, the Georgia Guidestones. Before we get to that, I do have some very good news to share. We recently surpassed 50,000 downloads of our podcast episodes, and we do put quite a bit of time and effort into each show, so it's very rewarding that so many of you are enjoying it out there. A very heartfelt thanks to you and to all of our listeners for helping us reach this milestone. As a small way of saying thanks, we'd like to offer 50% off our walking tours this weekend, that's May 26th to 28th, 2017, to all of our listeners when purchasing tickets online through our website, which is hauntedwalk.com. Just use the promo code 50, F-I-F-T-Y, and you can get half-price tours this weekend as we celebrate the 50,000 downloads. Another way you can help support the show is to subscribe to it on whichever podcast platform you're listening to us on, and always to leave us a kind review.
It's massive, and it's set back off the road, so if you're driving by, you may miss them because it's on some piece of farmland. They're just very massive, so you get a kind of an awe about it.
That was Susan Warner, acting president of the Elbert County Chamber of Commerce, describing the very first time she stood before the Georgia Guidestones, and we'll be hearing a little more from her later on in the show. The mystery of the Guidestones begins on a Friday afternoon in June 1978, when an elegant gray-haired gentleman arrives unannounced at the offices of Elberton Granite Finishing. The Elbert area is known for having some of the best granite in the world. Now, the man only identifies himself as R.C. Christian, but claims to represent a small group of loyal Americans who believe in God, lived outside Georgia, and simply wanted to leave a message for future generations. He claims they've been planning a complicated and large stone monument. Not only was the man asking for stones larger than had ever been quarried in the county, he also wanted them cut, finished, and assembled into some kind of enormous astronomical instrument. Christian explained that the stones would function as a compass, calendar, and clock, and should be capable of withstanding catastrophic events. It would also need to be engraved with a set of guides or precepts written in 8 of the world's major languages. The president of the granite company does not take the man seriously at first and tries to dissuade him by providing a quote several times larger than anything his company had ever done before. Given the specificity of the plans, the special tools involved, heavy equipment, and that consultants would be required, this was not going to be a cheap project. Christian simply asked how long it will take, and if there is a banker in the town that the man trusts. A few minutes later, R.C. Christian walks into the office of Wyatt Martin, president of the Granite City Bank. From the outset, Christian acknowledges that he is using a pseudonym and that his group has been planning this project in secret now for over 20 years and wished to remain anonymous. Christian told Martin that he had visited monuments throughout Europe and that he was particularly impressed with Stonehenge. Christian also presented a message from the group which read in part, "Stonehenge and other vestiges of human thought arouse our curiosity, but carry no message for our guidance. To convey our ideas across time to other human beings, we want to erect a monument, a cluster of graven stones which will silently display our ideas when we are gone. We hope they will merit increasing acceptance, and through their silent persistence, they will hasten, in a small degree, the coming Age of Reason. I do want to point out that I am going to put some additional images and videos of the Georgia Guidestones on our website, hauntedwalk.com/podcasts. So if you want to see what the stones look like at any time, you can just jump on our website there. Promising to return after the weekend, the mysterious stranger leaves the bank and goes off to charter a small plane to scout sites for the monument. Everyone was a little surprised when Christian returned to the bank on the Monday. Martin the banker explained that he could not proceed unless he could verify the man's true identity and get some assurances that he could pay for this thing. Eventually, the two men negotiated an agreement. Christian would reveal his real name on the condition that Martin promised to serve as his sole intermediary, that he would sign a confidentiality agreement pledging never to disclose the information to another living soul, and agreed to destroy all documents and records related to the project when it was finished. He said he was going to send the money from different bank accounts across the country, Martin said in a television interview, because he wanted to make sure it couldn't be traced. He made it clear that he was very serious about secrecy. Before leaving town, Christian met again with the granite company and presented the contractor with a shoebox containing a wooden model of the monument he wanted, plus 10 or so pages of detailed specifications. They accepted the model and the instructions, but remained skeptical until Martin, the banker, phoned the following Friday to say he had just received a $10,000 deposit. Work soon began. A major challenge was finding large enough pieces of granite to accommodate the design. They had to go 114 feet into the rock of the quarry to find hunks of granite big enough for the project. The first slab they removed weighed 28 tons. As the stones were being cleaned and cut, the location of the monument was chosen. A flat-topped hill with a clear view from every direction. Christian buys this 5 acres of land in Elbert County and grants lifetime cattle grazing rights to the previous owner and his children. He also uses the previous owner's construction company to build the foundation upon which the monument will sit. In his specifications, Christian says that the state of Georgia was selected for specific reasons. The wide selection of quality granite available, a generally mild climate that might help ensure the permanence of the monument, and because his great-grandmother was a Georgia native. The site they chose is also the highest point in Elbert County. With the land deal done, Christian says farewell to the folks at the granite company, adding, "You will never see me again." From then on, he only communicates through the banker Mr. Martin, whom he later instructs to transfer ownership of the land to Elbert County, as he figures civic pride would be its best protection. Martin has stated that all of Christian's correspondence came from different cities across the country, but never the same place twice. As work continued on the stones, the astrological elements of the design were so extremely sophisticated that the granite company had to retain the services of an astronomer from the University of Georgia to help with the project. The center column was to have a small hole drilled into it from which the North Star should be visible at all times. A second cut, which looks like a mail slot in a door, was designed to align with the position of the rising sun during the solstices and equinoxes. The principal component of the capstone, which sits on top, was a small aperture through which a beam of sunlight would pass at noon each day, indicating on the center stone the day of the year. Carved into the sides of this capstone, in Egyptian hieroglyphics, Classic Greek, Sanskrit, and Babylonian cuneiform, was a mission statement of sorts that reads, "Let these be guidestones to an age of reason." Believe it or not, the United Nations was even involved in providing these translations of these old archaic languages. The main feature of the monument, however, are the 10 precepts or principles written on the 4 large stone slabs in 8 different languages, including English, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, Arabic, Hebrew, Hindi, and Swahili. We'll break down the precepts in a little more detail, but first, let me tell you what these 10 precepts are. Number 1, maintain humanity under 500 million, in perpetual balance with nature. Number 2, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Number 3, unite humanity with a living new language. Number 4, rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. Number 5, protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. Number 6, let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Number 7, avoid petty laws and useless officials. Number 8, balance personal rights with social duties. Number 9, prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. And number 10, be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. We'll talk about these 10 commandments in a little more detail in just a little bit. Before the monument was revealed to the public, it was already a source of controversy. The rumor was that the granite company, the president of it, was behind the whole thing, working along with the banker as his accomplice, and that the whole story was a hoax or a ruse made up. The gossip got so bad that they each agreed to take a lie detector test to prove their innocence, and the local paper confirms they convincingly passed. Even though they did pass, the controversy and this lie detector test add more to the interest of the monument and concerns about what is being inscribed on the stones. Many people believed that the stones were the devil's work, so much so that a local minister predicted that occult groups would flock to the Guidestones, warning that someday a sacrifice would take place there. What added to this notion was that the sandblaster who worked on inscribing these precepts into the stones reported that he was constantly distracted by strange music and disjointed voices. The unveiling of the monument occurs on March 22nd, 1980, and it's quite a scene. The congressman is there. There are over 400 people in attendance and television crews from Atlanta. A few feet west of the monument is an explanatory tablet or piece of granite that's embedded into the ground. And the tablet identifies the structure, the languages used, lists various facts about its size, weight, and astronomical features, and the date it was installed. It also speaks of a time capsule buried under it, but the spaces on the stone reserved for filling in the date the time capsule was put in the ground and the date the time capsule is to be opened were never inscribed. So there's some debate or question if that time capsule is actually under there. But that certainly hasn't stopped some vandals or treasure seekers from chipping away at the edges of this tablet, maybe trying to get at what's underneath. As we turn back to these 10 precepts, many people have been disturbed by what is written on these stones, in particular rule number 1, which is to maintain humanity under 500 million people in perpetual balance with nature. At the time the monument was built, there were around 4 billion people on the planet, 4 billion. So to get to that 500 million number would be a reduction of about 85% of the world's population. With today's population, just over 7 billion, obviously that percentage would be even higher. This first precept is clearly connected to the second rule, which is guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Now, these two combined have raised concerns about eugenics, which is the science of improving population by controlling breeding to increase the occurrence of desirable characteristics. And the most obvious and evil example of this would be Nazi Germany. And I'd like to read a little bit from the writings of R.C. Christian, which he left with the Granite Company, which speak directly to this issue. In 1980, as these stones were being raised, the most pressing world problem was the need to control human numbers. In recent centuries, technology and abundant fuels have made possible a multiplication of humanity far beyond what is prudent or long sustainable. Now we can foresee the impending exhaustion of those energy sources and the depletion of world reserves of many vital raw materials. Controlling our reproduction is urgently needed. It will require major changes in our attitudes and customs. Unfortunately, the inertia of human custom can be extreme. This is especially true when those for whom custom is a dominant force are uninformed of the need for change. Nearly every nation is now overpopulated in terms of a perpetual balance with nature. We are like a fleet of overcrowded lifeboats, confronted with the approaching tempest. In the United States of America, we are seriously overtaxing our resources to maintain our present population in the existing state of prosperity. We are destroying our farmland, and we have grown dangerously dependent upon external sources for oil, materials, and other non-renewable resources. Nations such as Japan, Holland, and Haiti are even more seriously overpopulated, and therefore in greater jeopardy. In these circumstances, reproduction is no longer exclusively a personal matter. Society must have a voice and some power of direction in regulating this vital function. The wishes of human couples are important, but not paramount. The interests of present society and the welfare of future generations must be given increasing consideration as we develop mechanisms to bring rational control to our childbearing. No person should be brought into the world unwanted or unneeded. No child should be conceived through carelessness. If each life is to have value, every conception must be part of an ordered plan of two parents who are aware of their responsibilities to that child and to society. It is extremely important that every national government develop immediately a considered population policy. The need is urgent. It should take precedence over other problems, even those relating to national defense. Population control is a global problem. The actions of one nation have far-reaching effects on others. Overcrowding human beings in conditions of squalor and ignorance is dehumanizing. It is an evil which cannot be tolerated. These writings from R.C. Christian are really fascinating because on one hand, you can agree with some of his points. Overpopulation is an issue. Our consumption of natural resources continues to be an issue today. And certainly I think we all would like to see every child brought into the world in favorable circumstances. But on the other hand, once we start limiting individuals' ability to have children, that's when we start getting into a gray area. And once we talk about reductions in populations or population control, well, who's deciding these functions? And as we veer back into Nazi Germany, I can understand why some people would be a little bit concerned about this. In the Western world, we take our freedoms very seriously. And while places like China have successfully, to some degree, I suppose, implemented restrictions on how many children couples can have, it's very difficult to imagine people in the Western world ever accepting that kind of control. There are a few other additional precepts that have been the source of controversy. The third rule, unite humanity with a living new language. This has raised a lot of concerns, particularly for Christians, as the book of Revelation does warn of a common tongue and a one-world government as accomplishments of the Antichrist. Also similar is rule number 6, which is let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. So it's this idea of this new world order, one government, kind of one legal system that gets superimposed upon all the nations of the world. Similarly, rule number 4, rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason, can also be quite threatening to Christians, as they tend to view the commitment to faith as something extremely important and above all others. The other 5 rules are much less controversial. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. I think that's agreeable to all of us. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. Depending how you feel about politicians, obviously that could be right up your alley. Balance personal rights with social duties. Well, that seems reasonable too. Be not a cancer on earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. Obviously, with the effects of climate change we are seeing, could tie into that. But even if you're a climate change denier, I suppose, most people would say don't be a cancer on the earth. Sounds like a reasonable proposition. Take care of the only planet that we have. A few months after the monument was unveiled, a group of witches or Wiccans started making weekly pilgrimages from Atlanta where they would dance and chant and do some type of ceremonies. And pagan ceremonies were also held there, including at least one marriage at the Guidestones between a witch and a warlock. And I'm not quite educated enough in that particular area to explain it, but a wedding has taken place. One of my kind of favorite points about the Guidestones is that if you do look at them from above or overhead, they make an X. And many people have suggested this is kind of a suggested landing site for UFOs that may be in the area. I'm not sure there's too much credibility to that, but I do enjoy that concept. In the writings of R.C. Christian, it's fairly clear that the monument is meant to serve one of 2 purposes. One, to kind of curb the way humanity is currently existing, to offset future tragedies that are, I guess, imminent or about to happen, or that the end has already happened and the Earth's population has been decimated for some reason, and these Guidestones could be used as a way to rebuild the foundations of humanity, doing so in a better or more sustainable fashion. Quoting here from R.C. Christian, "There are alternatives to Armageddon. They are attainable, but they will not happen without coordinated efforts by millions of dedicated people in all nations of the earth." In regards to how the stones could be used in the future in this apocalyptic scenario, I did find a very amusing quote from Loris Mangiani, an astronomy professor at the University of Georgia, who questions really how useful the Guidestones would be to survivors of a civilization-ending cataclysm. The devices incorporated into the stones, he says, are relatively easy stuff that most human societies have developed early in their histories. Don't get me wrong, as a monument, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that, he told CNN, but added, every decent civilization, going back to a couple of millennia before Christ, has figured this out. How to make gasoline? Now that would be useful. As we've discussed, the mystery that surrounded the stones was very well known, and people were very interested in figuring out who R.C. Christian was. And the media at the time, in the early 1980s, spent quite a bit of time trying to track him down, generally without success. Christian did keep in contact with Martin the banker, and they became pen pals almost. And occasionally, Christian would even call him on the phone and tell him, "I'm at the Atlanta airport. Why don't you come down for dinner?" He says Christian never told him anything about the group he belonged to. And the last letter he received from Christian was September 2001. And Martin assumes that he has since passed away based upon the age the man looked when he met him. With all the mystery surrounding the Guidestones, a lot of investigators have come to their own conclusions or conspiracy theories as to who R.C. Christian is and what these Guidestones are all about. One activist demanded the Guidestones be smashed into 1,000,000 pieces due to their satanic origin. He claims Christian was a high-ranking member of a Luciferian society at the forefront of the New World Order. He compares the precepts to the 10 Commandments of the New World Order. Now, his interpretation, which has been quite strong and quite well spread, has led to vandalism at the site, including spray paint being put on the stones with texts such as, "Jesus will beat you, Satan," "No one world government." Additional graffiti indicated that September 11th was an inside job, and the always popular President Obama is a Muslim. Now, some of these vandals went to extreme lengths, including putting polyurethane over top of the paint. Now, the monuments generally do get restored, but it's a long process that involves kind of chipping away at this paint that's been put over top. In reading this theory, I was very tempted to reach out to Stu DeHaan, who you may recall we had on in episode 10, The Friendly Satanist, as he describes Satanism in very different terms than this very negative approach being taken by this one activist. You can always check out that episode on our website, hauntedwalk.com/podcasts. Some of the most popular conspiracy theories about the stones is that Christian and his associates are Rosicrucians, a secret society of mystics that claim to know esoteric truths about the nature, the universe, and the spiritual realm that have been concealed from ordinary people. And the suggestion is that the name R.C. Christian is a homage to the legendary 14th century founder of the order, Christian Rosenkreutz. The secret group published a series of well-known manifestos, and the order does stress reason and does endorse a harmonic relationship with nature. So who knows, maybe that could play a part. My absolute favorite theory, though, that I have no credibility in, is that R.C. Christian was in fact the media mogul Ted Turner, who owned CNN and a billboard empire before that and became one of the largest private landowners in the US and was known to have a strong passion for nature. Now, while this is an interesting theory as it does involve a celebrity of sorts, I don't think there's much to it more than that. When the banker Wyatt Martin hears these theories, he really wishes he could share more of the knowledge he knows about R.C. Christian, but is unwilling to break his promise despite whatever outlandish theories exist. What is fact is that Martin does know his real name. However, he actually did break his promise to a small degree in that he did keep all of the correspondence that were sent to him by R.C. Christian. He did not destroy them. He thought someday he might use them to write a book. The saving of these documents, however, is tied to what I believe is the most plausible theory about the identity of R.C. Christian. And that ties to a doctor named Herbert Kirsten who lived in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Now, several years ago, a photo was taken of some of Martin's documents that he'd collected from R.C. Christian. And when the images were manipulated, zoomed in upon, there was an address on the corner of one of the envelopes that was in this random shot, which then people did some research on. And tracking down this address myself, I came across the obituary of Herbert Kirsten, which is still available on the Des Moines Register website, which you can read for yourself. I'll read part of it here as I do think there is some really interesting information. Dr. Herbert H. Kirsten, 85, passed away on Friday, June 10th, 2005 at his home. He was born on May 7th, 1920 in Fort Dodge, Iowa. He graduated from Fort Dodge Senior High and attended the University of Notre Dame and the University of Iowa for undergraduate studies. He then graduated from the University of Iowa School of Medicine. He enlisted in the United States Army, where he served during World War II, Charleston, South Carolina, Chicago, the Philippines, and Japan, where he was in charge of a 1,000-bed hospital in Tokyo. While serving in the Army, Dr. Kirsten returned to the United States, where he completed his surgical residencies and joined his father and brothers, John and Paul, in the practice of medicine at the Kirsten Clinic in Fort Dodge. He met his wife, who was a nurse, at the clinic, and they were married February 19th, 1955. They had 4 children and ended up with 14 grandchildren. Dr. Kirsten was active in the Fort Dodge Rotary Club, the Fort Dodge Historical Society, the Head Start Program, the Fort Museum, a fellow in the American College of Surgeons, and the Iowa Medical Society. Now, here's the important part. He was an avid bridge player, a formal recreational pilot, and a conservationist who loved nature and trees. Everyone who knew him respected his love for his tree farm, called Walnut Farms, located west of Fort Dodge. Dr. Kirsten had many hobbies, including woodworking, oil and water painting, bridge, the Republican Party, physics, livestock, and grain farming and music. He was a naturalist who was very involved in environmental and world population issues. I don't think I've ever seen that in an obituary before. Dr. Kirsten had a very broad vision of humanity and a myriad of personal and academic research, which he pursued with diligent and thorough research. He was a skilled and dedicated surgeon, committed to high standards of excellence in all that he did. Dr. Kirsten was the essence of integrity and honesty, and an exemplary gentleman. His noble devotion to his family, wife, patients, and profession is greatly appreciated by all those who have been touched by his life. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be sent to the Alzheimer's Association. To quickly review the evidence, Wyatt Martin, the banker, receives at least one piece of correspondence from R.C. Christian that has this Fort Dodge, Iowa address. A search of that address reveals that a Dr. Herbert Kirsten lived there for close to 50 years and up until his death in 2005. Now, it seems a huge coincidence that this man in his obituary as well also has mention of being very concerned about matters of both world population and environmental concerns. That coincidence, I think, is a little too much for me. And when you hear about his love of nature, a tree farm that he owned, this does sound exactly like the type of person that would build these monuments. As a doctor, and knowing that there was a Kirsten Institute at some point, we might suspect he would have some financial resources available to be part of this project. Now, was there actually a group of people involved in this? None of that information has come to light. Was it just him or a group? We just don't know. Obviously, the mystery here is part of the fun. And getting back to Susan Warner, the acting president of the Elbert County Chamber of Commerce, I was curious to look into the tourism side of this, being a tourism business ourselves. I was curious what role the Guidestones play in the tourism industry of the area.
I believe for Alberton that the Guidestones bring in tourism. They're a big attraction. People are there constantly. As a matter of fact, if you look on the Chamber of Commerce Facebook, you'll see that the Guidestones are featured there too because they are so popular. I was just remarking the other day that I have never driven past the Guidestones when I haven't seen somebody there. And now we've just renovated our new Samuel Elber Hotel, which is here directly in the middle of downtown Elberton. And I can't prove it, but I pretty much feel that the Guidestones are populating that hotel too.
Given that the Guidestones draw people to the area, which then brings obviously money, dollars, which obviously then brings jobs as well. It is a financial engine of certain sorts. I was curious how locals feel about the monuments today. Do they see them with pride as an opportunity for economic advancement? Or do some people still have this negative connotation with them? How do the locals feel about the Georgia Guidestones?
They began as a source of pride, and then it developed into an awesome monument that people like to come to see. So they very much love their Guidestones, and they're featured here at the Chamber, and they have just developed into this. They didn't begin that way. They just began as a simple monument that a gentleman wanted to erect in a field, and it's just developed into a popular tourist attraction.
That brings us to the end of the episode, and I don't know about you, but I would love to take a trip down there and see those Guidestones for myself. If any of you have had the opportunity to go to Elbert County and see the Guidestones, if you have any photos or stories to share, we would love to absolutely hear those or see those photos. You can always feel free to reach out to us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. And our handle for all of those is @HauntedWalk. Quick reminder, if you need tour information or to book your tickets for one of our walking tours in Toronto, Ottawa, or Kingston, jump on our website, hauntedwalk.com. Also lots of news there about special events and things that we have going on throughout the summer, including our special 150 years of Canada's scariest ghost stories, taking place in Ottawa the weeks right around Canada Day. If you're thinking about joining us for our tour this weekend, May 26th to 28th, 2017, remember you can use that promo code online, 50, F-I-F-T-Y, to get 50% off your tickets, basically a 2-for-1, to say thank you for listening to our episodes. A special thank you to Susan Warner, to our amazing audio editor, Michelle Dennis, and to Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com for the additional music. As always, feel free to reach out to me, Jim, at hauntedwalk.com, if you have questions or show ideas, or if you think you'd make a great guest on our show yourself. Until we meet again, sweet dreams.